The movie starts off in a desolate California desert where a group of spectators gather to watch a film. A police car soon arrives at the scene and destroys all the chairs used as props. Sheriff Chad then gets out of the car, takes a glass of water from his associate, and begins explaining the idea of the film. He starts by saying that many moments in cinema occur without any reason, giving examples of movies like Romeo and Juliet, The Pianist, and JFK. He explains that all great films contain an important element called a no reason, because life itself is filled without any reason. The sheriff then pours his water on the ground, emphasizing the act to be of no reason. It's making me have to pee though, so it's got some sort of power. After he drives off, an accountant distributes binoculars to everyone and then departs on a bicycle. The spectators begin observing the distant landscape through their binoculars, eagerly awaiting the start of the film. At first, they see nothing but the barren Californian desert, causing one of them to comment if it's an old silent film. But suddenly, a woman spots a dump area and sees something moving. She then eagerly suggests her friends look that way too. The scene shifts to the garbage, where a car tire named Robert suddenly comes to life. Initially, it learns to stand upright and then figures out how to roll. It then encounters a plastic water bottle and hesitates for a while before rolling over it. Next, it sees a spider and casually crushes it to death. But when it comes across a glass beer bottle, it is unable to crush it by rolling over it. Frustrated, Robert vibrates intensely and uses psychokinetic powers to shatter the bottle. This excites the spectators, and they are now fully invested in this film. In the following scene, Robert starts to tread down the desert and make its way to the town. On the way, it encounters a tin can and uses its same psychokinetic power to make it explode. Following this, it continues its journey and eventually takes rest under a tree as night falls. The audience also falls asleep in the open air as they anticipate another day of watching the tire perform magic tricks. The next morning, Robert wakes up and starts its day by drinking water from a nearby pond. Just as it finishes, it is startled to see a rabbit nearby. It then starts to vibrate violently and unleashes its psychokinetic power. As Robert concentrates on the rabbit, the animal suddenly explodes into pieces. This act of barbarism makes the tire really happy, and it continues the day treading happily through the desert. Meanwhile, the accountant arrives at the site and finds the audience asleep in the desert. Before waking them, he rummages through the area, even stealing cash from two sleeping men. He then wakes the audience and tells them to get ready for the film. Some members of the audience, having spent the night there, complain about being hungry and wanting breakfast, but the accountant ignores their complaints and asks them to grab their binos instead, as the film is about to reach its climax. Meanwhile, Robert treads down the empty road until it spots a beautiful woman driving by. It tries to use its powers on her, but only manages to stall her car. As the tire rolls towards her stalled vehicle, a truck suddenly passes by and runs it over. This breaks the connection and allows the woman's car to start again. After she drives away, the enraged tire uses its powers to explode a crow. It then follows the truck to a gas station where the driver is trying to call someone through the payphone. Shortly after, the driver decides to resume his journey, only to be stopped by a mysterious standing tire. Robert soon begins to shake violently and concentrates on the truck driver. It lets out all of his energy, causing the man's head to explode into several pieces. The spectators who are watching this film enjoy the gruesome scene, as they believe it is all staged. After taking his revenge, Robert comes across a nearby desert town where it finds the beautiful woman again. She parks her car on the roadside and checks into a motel. Robert then watches her shower through an open door before she locks the door shut. Following this, the tire makes itself comfortable in the room next to hers. It watches the TV shows like a human and changes the channels using its powers before eventually falling asleep on the bed. The spectators continue to watch the unfolding events, believing all of them to be part of the film. Later, we learn that the accountant who is behind this film is also staying at the same motel. As he cleans his shoes, we see a live turkey beside him. Just then, he receives a call from someone whom he addresses as Master. The Master gives him some orders, and the accountant promises to follow them the next morning. Next, he opens his briefcase full of weapons and retrieves two sharp knives to prepare the turkey. In the morning, the motel maid enters the room where Robert is staying. She notices muddy tire tracks on the bed sheet and wonders what kind of weirdo would bring a tire into the room. She then discovers Robert in the shower and throws it out, thinking the guest might have pulled a prank on her. But this only enrages the tire, and it retaliates by blowing up her head. Shortly after, the motel owner's son notices Robert coming back to life and locking itself inside the room. This freaks him out, so he quickly tells his dad about it. However, the latter doesn't believe him and thinks he's bluffing. Or stoned. Stupid kid, always stoned. The boy is then sent to get pizzas instead of disturbing his dad. He paddles down the road on his bicycle just as the police arrive to investigate the maid's murder. Meanwhile, the accountant arrives at the site and wakes up the spectators by offering them the cooked turkey. Having not eaten for the past 2 days, they quickly devour the food. However, a man in a wheelchair is unable to join in due to his condition. The scene then shifts to the road, where the motel owner's son arrives with pizzas. He stops in front of a dead crow, the same one Robert had blown up the other day. He picks up the carcass and places it on the pizzas, muttering that these are the extra toppings just like his dad wanted. Back at the motel, Robert follows its crush to the swimming pool and eagerly watches her dive into the water. When she finishes relaxing and departs, it also jumps into the pool and rests for a while. In the meantime, a young boy from the audience starts feeling a sharp pain in his stomach. His dad believes it could be because of eating too fast and assures him that the pain will go away on its own. However, more people start showing signs of illness, with some even throwing up. The guy in the wheelchair who hadn't eaten the turkey remarks that the food could have been poisoned, as he is the only one who isn't sick. Soon after, all the spectators except the wheelchair guy lose consciousness and drop dead on the ground. Back at the motel, police officers, including Sheriff Chad, are investigating the gruesome murder of the maid. The motel owner's son tries to convince them that the tire is alive, as he had seen it entering the room where the maid was found dead. Unfortunately, they don't believe him, and his dad continues to scold him for talking rubbish. Dad gets so angry that he even slams the tire on the floor and throws it away. Suddenly, an alarm goes off on the sheriff's watch, and he announces that their acting is over. He tells the motel owner to go home, as they have completed their part in the film. He even tells the officers to stop the act and return home to their families, to their real lives. But the confused cops assure him that this is real life, because there is a dead body lying next to them. Sheriff Chad counters by asking one of the officers to shoot him. Surprisingly, the gunshot doesn't hurt him, as he is wearing a bulletproof vest with fake blood. Chad then continues to convince his officers that the whole situation is fake and they can all go home now. The cops are still confused and ask him about the maid's dead body, and Chad proudly says that it is part of the film too. However, when the maid, who has no head, doesn't wake up, even after the film is over, Chad looks concerned. He confronts the motel owner and interrogates him about his relationship with the maid. As they are talking, Robert the tire suddenly shows up and bursts the motel owner's head for mistreating it earlier. Having witnessed the horrific murder, Sheriff Chad finally snaps out of his acting and realizes that this is real life. He also acknowledges the motel owner's son's words and realizes that the tire is on a killing spree. Shortly after, he rounds up his officers and apologizes for getting caught up in the film. He then leads the police on a tire hunt. Meanwhile, Robert the tire comes across a mirror and finally sees his reflection. He realizes that he has been a tire, not a human, all this time. The scene then shifts to the wheelchair guy, who is the only one alive to watch the film. As he is busy peeking through the binos, the accountant interrupts him with a table of poisoned food. We learn that the accountant intends to kill him as well and end the film for good. However, the wheelchair guy refuses to eat anything and asks to be left alone. The accountant then tries to persuade him by talking about his childhood memories. He reveals that he enjoyed killing his elder brother by smashing his head with an enormous stone while recalling his past traumas. The accountant mistakenly eats the poisoned food and ends up meeting the same death as the audience. But the wheelchair guy doesn't even bother helping, as he believes it's all part of the act. In the meantime, the police chase Robert down the road and finally encounter him face to face. But this turns out to be a huge mistake, as the demonic tire starts to vibrate uncontrollably. It focuses its attention on the lieutenant seated in the police car and blows his head mercilessly. After fleeing from the police, Robert encounters a group of people burning a large pile of tires. He is enraged to see his kind being murdered in such a horrific way. The scene then jumps forward by 3 days to reveal the aftermath of a killing spree. Dead, headless bodies are lying everywhere on the streets and inside supermarkets. The police continue their search for the murderous tire until they finally find it watching an auto racing program in a house, having killed the occupants. Sheriff Chad then comes up with a plan to kill the tire for good. He brings a mannequin, which resembles the beautiful woman from earlier, and rigs it with dynamite. He hopes that when Robert blows up the mannequin's head, the dynamite will detonate and destroy him as well. Sheriff Chad then seeks help from the beautiful woman to lure Robert out of the house. They eventually succeed in doing so, but when the tire destroys the mannequin's head, the dynamite fails to explode. This enrages the sheriff so much that he decides to take the matter into his own hands. He enters the house and kills Robert with his shotgun, then gives the tire to the wheelchair guy, who had been eagerly awaiting the ending of the film. Just as the sheriff and other police officers leave the scene, a tricycle emerges from the house. The wheelchair guy realizes that Robert is just reincarnated and begs him for mercy. He assures the tricycle that he's just a spectator and not one of the characters in the film. However, the tricycle ignores his pleas and kills him anyway, blowing not only his head, but the whole body into several pieces. This signifies that Robert has become more powerful and fierce. The film comes to an end as the tricycle rolls down the road and resurrects an army of tires on its way to Hollywood.